Hello, insatiable listeners. Allie here. I want to let you know about my A Path Forward workshop that I'll be presenting live in the cities of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Philadelphia, New York, and Denver. Traditional goals like lose 30 pounds or cut out sugar do not work for the seasoned dieter. What those do is it gives you more rules, more restriction, and more rebellion, and that gives all the power to the food. In A Path Forward workshop, you will learn your one true goal that gives you the power and enables you to achieve your health and weight loss goals. I hope you'll join me in these live workshops as I'd love to meet so many of you in person. Visit my website, allieshapiro.com, A Path Forward workshop for all the details and to sign up. I can't wait to meet you.
The adaptive challenge is in what are you going to do about the reasons why you were turning to that crutch in the first place? And I think there is a huge difference, obviously, between alcohol and food because, you can kind of stop drinking and nothing bad happens, but we've all got to eat, right? Say I want to lose weight, for example, and I have this idea that I'm going to prepare all my food, right? So I don't have to really think about it too much. I'm going to get my meals all organized and all of that kind of stuff. So that's my plan. And then I find that actually I can't really be asked going to the supermarket to get all the food. Sunday was going to be my prep day. Like, you know what? Gilmore Girls rerun. I could easily just spend the next 4 hours watching. So I probably won't be doing my prep. So there's all these kind of resisty behaviors that show up, and they often show up as inaction or action that is contrary to something that would support the plan.
You know battling food in your body doesn't work. You want to love and accept yourself. And because you're insatiable, you want results too. And wouldn't you know, you bring the same intensity to your life, wanting to maximize your time, potential, and experiences you have here on this beautiful and wondrous planet Earth. Fair warning, it will be a roller coaster, but for those insatiable, that's your prime time to thrive. We're here to say yes to the hunger of wanting it all. I'm your co-host, Allie Shapiro, a health coach who helps people end the losing battle of dieting and find a truce with food.
And I'm Juliette Berg, nutritionist, fitness expert, and the co-owner of Unite Fitness Studio franchise.
Welcome to episode 62, Why is Weight Loss So Hard? With Sas Petherick. Sas has a master's degree in coaching and mentoring from Oxford Brookes and is a certified Dr. Martha Beck Life Coach. She's been coaching women leaders for the past 6 years in adaptive challenges. In today's episode, find out why it's great news that you only made it to day 9 of your Whole30 cleanse, or your resolutions have already gone to shit. It turns out, even though you think Weight Watchers, Whole30, or ketogenic diets are all different, their approach is actually the same, and it gives the power to the food. Today, learn the difference between technical and adaptive change and why weight loss is an adaptive problem that we try to use technical solutions for, like cleanses and marathon training, but it absolutely does not work.
Welcome, everybody, today. I am so excited. We have one of my favorite coaches in the entire world, and that says a lot because I am very skeptical of coaching, even though I'm a coach, which I think Sas is as well, and Juliette. It's the same thing with trainers, right? Anyone can call themselves a coach. But Sas, who we have here today, is just exquisite life coach, brilliant, articulate, and we are here today to talk about why it's so fantastic when you only get to the 9th day of Whole30, or it's February and your resolutions have worn off. And I think this is going to be really eye-opening for people. So thanks for coming on the show, Sas.
Are you kidding? I'm so thrilled to be here. This is one of my favorite things to talk about.
Good. So let's kick off with, I think if I was still in my dieting struggles and someone was like, congratulations, you couldn't finish your cleanse, or Juliette, we were talking before this, like Juliette had a client come to her today that said, what day did she get to the Whole30, Juliette?
12. She went to 12 days on it.
Yeah. And I get so excited when my clients can't do anything extreme anymore, because to me that says, oh, they're open to a different process and a different type of change. And so I'd love for you as a life coach, when you see people who are like stuck there in that same where what has always worked, or maybe it hasn't been working, but they're finally really to consider, wait, maybe it's not the plan. It's me. It's me.
Mm-hmm. I think this is so interesting because in my own history with diets, and I have a kind of turbulent body type, I call it, and that my body is a total mirror of where I am in my life. If I'm out of balance, so is my body. It's a fantastic indicator of where I am. I think I've tried every diet, and I have done the kind of quite extreme things where you do a juice cleanse or something like that because you're just desperate for the answer. The only thing I lost on a juice cleanse, incidentally, was my will to live. So
I felt the same way as you.
Exactly. Me too.
I'm not, I mean, I would envy those who could do a juice cleanse even a few days, but my constitution would not let me ever do a juice cleanse. It felt like I was dying.
Exactly. And I think, my own sense is that when we stop doing something because we're just like, cannot for the love of anything do this one more day, that is a fantastic sign that this isn't going to work. Because the whole point of a relationship with nutrition is that it's about supporting your life. And so if whatever is happening with you, either psychologically or physically or in that kind of phenomenological, just a felt sense, well, that was quite a big word, wasn't it? But just the felt sense of what is actually going on for you as you embark on the next diet. When that no longer works for you, it's a fantastic sign that this isn't going to be a solution that is going to support your life. And my sense is that for most of us, and myself included, when I was searching for the diet that was going to be the answer, is that actually it's a quest for certainty. We just want someone to give us the bloody answer. Just tell me what to eat. I'll do that. And so it's this kind of scattergun approach to trying whatever the latest fad is, whatever the latest, the kind of thing that the celebrity you admire is pitching. And we sort of follow that because we're looking for someone else to tell us the right combination of nutrients that's going to support our life. And it took me a really long time to realize that there is no way no one else has that answer for me. That's something I have to find for myself. But the willingness to be with the ambiguity that realization creates can be terrifying. I think when we've spent most of our lives being told what's good food, what's bad food, what's good for us, what's not, what we should be eating. There's all this kind of, particularly for women, there's this kind of good girl, bad girl thing. And I know, Ali, you're just like the expert on that. That when actually we come to the point where we think, actually, no one else has got the answer for us. It's me. I've got to face this thing. I think that's when things get really interesting. And that for me is that's the real revolution that takes place, because it's not just about your relationship with food and nutrition. It's about the relationship that you have with yourself.
And I love that you said that relationship, what we're really is that craving for certainty, because, when I really work on the stories and the emotions that come up with people, and they notice that a lot of times it is that uncertainty of when they go to eat. Right. And so it's so important for people to realize that looking externally and for someone else to tell you, it's not a craving it's a craving for certainty, not for someone else to say this is exactly it. And it's amazing how we are convinced that the next person knows. Right?
Well, it's interesting because I always had this correlation between, I noticed this as I started to heal my relationship to my body and food, that when there was a lot of stress in my life or uncertainty, or, I think the new year for people all of a sudden is that there's a lot of pressure on, oh my gosh, it's a new year, a new me, right? Like, what am I going to do this year that's different than last year? But then rather than listening to our intuition, we look outside ourselves and say, well, what's going to fix it? So, whenever I would have uncertainty in my life, that's when I would always start reading diet books, or I'd start dissecting my body and looking at it in the mirror and being like, something's wrong with me. And there was always a correlation between when there was a lot of stress in my life and uncertainty. that I would try to create the certainty. Like, here it is. I'm going to read this diet. I'm going to do this plan. It's going to give me this sense of false self-control.
Totally. One of the things I have,
sorry, Ali, go ahead.
Oh, no, there's a little bit late. I was going to say, one of the things I have my clients work on is they'll notice they start to feel quote unquote fat, right? And they're like, sometimes that it's there, sometimes it's not. And I'm like, I want you to start to measure where you're feeling self-doubt. And when that hits a certain threshold, that's when the fat feeling comes, right? It's like you need a container to put that self-doubt somewhere. And the culture says it's got to be how you look in your clothes, right? It gives you an answer. It gives you that certainty. This is what it is.
Well, and I think what you're both kind of speaking to is this whole like new year, new you thing. This whole how do I create this ideal me really magically through the passing of time? One moment past midnight, suddenly it's all a new thing. And how many of us haven't like woken up and thought, right, today it's going to be different. This is the start of something amazing. And I think what happens though is that we take the same tools, the same mindset, the same behaviors, the same habits from yesterday into that day, into this new day, magical new day, and then we sort of worry about, oh God, it can all go wrong at any moment. So it's like we're trying to drive somewhere new using an old map. And I think that can really be quite confusing because it all feels very internal. It all feels like this must be something wrong with me because my sister-in-law or my colleague at work has lost 30 pounds doing Whole 30. Why the hell can't it work for me? It's like, well, maybe your body just needs carbs, honey. maybe it's that simple,
Oh my gosh, I want a shirt that says that.
Let's make them
carbs, honey, with like a honey pot on
it. and you have to put in parentheses, imagine a British accent or New Zealand accent saying this. Let's go into that because Sass and I both are influenced by some of the same theorists, but there's these different types of change, right? There's a change called technical change versus adaptive change. And technical change is when you can basically Google the answer, right? And I think a lot of people who succeed on things like Whole30 or Weight Watchers, or they read Joel Fuhrman on how to be a vegan, this is their first nutrition rodeo or second. And they're like, oh my God, I feel amazing when I eat vegetables. This is amazing, right? And that's technical change where there's already an answer out there and you just have to Google or find the right source. And do you have anything more to add to that, Sass, before we get into it?
Yeah, I think that's the thing about those technical problems, the things that we can just solve. To me, the things that already have an answer, so absolutely Googleable. But I think they're kind of step by step. They're quite formulaic. They can be really complex. Like I think, something like heart surgery can still be a technical problem, right? Because there is a known answer, there's a known procedure, and you just, follow these simple steps, and any, Joe Schmo surgeon can pretty much do that procedure. So I don't think it speaks to the complexity of the issue, but the difference between technical change or technical problems and adaptive change. And adaptive change is really what it means for any of us who have more than just a technical problem to solve. Adaptive change is really when we're walking into the unknown because there is no answer. No one can tell you what it's going to be like to be you in your body in a different size, a different way. And other examples of adaptive changes are things like becoming a parent, right? No one knows how it's going to be for you to parent that very specific little being that you have pushed out of your vagina into the world. Like that is a completely unique experience. So I think that's the two places I think where people can get slightly from the difference.
With anything, the way that their reactions to any milestone, anything that requires an emotional response. For example, I just got engaged and my reaction to me getting engaged was very different than some of my friends' reactions. There's no one way of, if you're supposed to be really happy or, all of a sudden I had depression for a moment. And then it was the question of, oh my gosh, is this not right? And it had nothing to do with that. But any kind of emotional trigger can occur when there's big milestone moments in your life, having kids, getting engaged, getting married, anything. And there's not one way to act.
And I love that you use the example of heart surgery too, Sass, because I feel like that is definitely an example, but a lot of healing is adaptive change, and the medical system tries to pigeonhole it into a technical solution. And what's interesting about like medication is on a lot of studies, you'll know 33% of people get better, 33% of people, nothing happens, and 33% of people get worse. But because the doctor's like, no, this should be working, right? It's like their blind spots are. And so I actually think some medicine, not all of it, is a lot more adaptive change than at least our healthcare system in the US. I'm not quite as familiar as the one in Britain or the United Kingdom or, oh God, I don't know what you guys call yourselves.
Yeah, I think the United Kingdom might be almost a bit cynical these days. But yeah.
Same with the United States of America.
Take postpartum depression, for example.
Exactly.
Is that could be chemical, right? They would say, oh, hormonal changes, it's chemical. Here's, an SSRI, and it'll all be okay. But that change that could occur is you have someone else to take care of. It's no longer you anymore. Like everybody has a different response, but that postpartum depression might just, like you were saying, be adaptive change that needs to take place.
Well, and some people don't go into pregnancy super healthy, so they could be depleted nutritionally, right? Like they might need, some people, their baby isn't sleeping, so that's triggering the depression. It's much more what Sass is saying is like the solution isn't there yet. That's what people need to realize is when they think they've failed all these diets or they think they need fixed, they're not looking at necessarily the right problem to begin with.
Exactly. And, my own real personal experience of this has been with being sober. So I stopped drinking 5 years ago, exactly yesterday, which is quite a weird.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that for me has been a huge adaptive challenge, because no one could tell me what I was going to be like as a sober person. I was terrified I was going to be a bit like Fun Bobby on Friends. You know that minor character on Friends?
Post on this. I cracked up.
Wait, on Friends?
He was a minor character, Fun Bobby, and he used to be super fun. He was the drinker character.
It's fun. I just watched Friends last night on TV on demand.
I don't remember Fun Bobby because I'll let Sass finish, but he wasn't so fun when he got sober, so you didn't remember him.
Okay, I just Googled him. I know who you're talking about now.
It's worth a Google. If you're a lovely young millennial listening, this might be a slightly esoteric reference, but Fun Bobby was a minor character on Friends who was super fun. He was the life and soul of the party, and he was a drinker, and everyone was kind of concerned about his drinking. And then he got sober, and he was dull as shit, and he was kind of ostracized. So my own experience of drinking was that gave me the courage to do the crazy things. I was the life and soul of the party. I was much funnier. I was much more entertaining. I was much more up for things. And I'm kind of on the introvert-extrovert spectrum. So I think if I'd known a bit more about that, I would have realized that actually my kind of any social anxiety I felt was probably just that I needed to go home. But no, actually, I just drank more vodka. So for me, I couldn't see a way that, because I was using alcohol as a way of dealing with any kind of stress or upset. My mum had died quite young, and so grief was a huge part of my life at that time. And that the whole idea of giving up that crutch that alcohol was providing felt completely unknowable to me. It was terrifying. But when I did finally decide in a quite sort of quiet, shameful morning that actually I can't live like this anymore. This is not who I want to be, and I don't really know what my future is going to hold if I carry on doing this. I sort of made the choice that I was just going to stop the drinking, and then I would sort of see what happened. And what I found was that to be sober, I needed to change a whole lot of other things in my life. And, so there are so many parallels, right, with a person who has a diet addiction or a kind of food body issue where it's just taking up a shit ton of space in your mind and your day, when it's controlling you, when it kind of has you rather than you have it, which is exactly how I felt about alcohol. That it's almost like the adaptive challenge is in, what are you going to do about the reasons why you were turning to that crutch in the first place? And I think there is a huge difference, obviously, between alcohol and food, because, you can kind of stop drinking and nothing bad happens, but we've all got to eat, right? So I know it is a very different problem, but I guess what I've learned from this is that actually how we do one thing is how we do everything, I think. So if you are finding that your relationship with how you're showing up in your life, in any area of your life where it's just taking up a ton of brain space and it no longer feels like it's working for you, that is always, to me, the sign that you're on a threshold of moving into an unknown place. And it is an adaptive challenge. If you're willing to walk into that unknown ambiguity and sort of see what your life could be if you changed, then that is walking the path of an adaptive challenge. And I can say 5 years later, it is the thing I'm most proud of, because it's not that I'm not a drinker anymore. I'm a whole different person. And it's that transformation that often happens when you just let go of a thing that has been eating into your energy, quite literally, I think, sometimes. When you can let go of that and know that it no longer has a hold on you, it becomes something else. It's not a challenge anymore.
And I think the thing for a lot of people who have any sort of obsession, whether it be with alcohol, dieting, their body image,
Exercise,
yeah, is they feel, like we were saying, very unsure of themselves, and they lack a level of confidence within themselves and feeling like they know that they're on the right path, whatever that means, right? Like no one really knows what the path is, but that they can feel this level of comfortability with not knowing versus before, when they're trying to control everything and numb themselves through alcohol, food, whatever it may be. So for you, saying you're a completely different person now, probably feel more like who you really are, right? At least that's for me. I feel very much more sure of myself and confident in the decisions that I make.
Well, and because you learn to trust a lot. Sorry, Ellie.
Go ahead.
My own theory about that is that you learn to trust yourself along the way.
Yes. Right? A client of mine yesterday was talking about this she doesn't trust herself around food. So she can't have food in the house, or certain foods. She will just binge eat on them. And then the guilt comes, and then the cycle comes. And I was explaining to her, as someone on the other side who used to have that, I have food in my house that I used to be able to never be around. And it's there now. And it's this level of trust that I have that I didn't used to have. So it's possible to build that.
Well, and that's for people listening, I want to give them some concrete examples of the difference between adaptive and technical change. So if you think the problem is with the food, right, then you listen to things like, don't keep it in your house. Don't eat, don't go to a party hungry. Take a breath and say, is this what you really want?
Drink a glass of water before each meal.
Right. And what you're doing is you're giving the power to the food versus what adaptive change is saying, no, you have the power. You're the common denominator. And so it's not about more rules, which then you rebel against, right? We've all paid for programs that we then rebel against. And we're like, why did I do this? Because we don't want the rules. But adaptive change is saying, how are you going to be different around that food in the house? How are you going to be different when you're at the party? A lot of my clients realize they overeat and overdrink because of that social anxiety that Sass talked about. So it's working on that and that requires building self-trust. So I just want to give people some examples of.
No, I think that's great.
I think that's perfect. And it reminds me, I did Jenny Craig once about 20 years ago. I don't know if you have Jenny. You have Jenny Craig.
It still exists. I can't believe it.
And I had my meeting, and I hadn't lost any weight. Hadn't lost any weight. My support person was had that sort of judgy face of, that's disappointing for everybody kind of face. And she said, well, tell me how the week's gone. And I said, well, look, last night, just, the day from hell, and I ended up having my supper by driving through KFC drive-through at 8:30 in the evening. And I said, tell me, how do I just not do that? She said, well, you just need to not do that.
That's a great answer.
If I knew that, I wouldn't be here.
It's like, but if I knew,
you just needed more willpower.
Yeah, if it's like, this is a circular argument, and you don't seem to be able to see that. You just want me to follow your rules. But there was a thing inside my mind that was, I need to be in a place where it never occurs to me that that's a good solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that Jenny Craig is going to help me do that.
And you know what?
And nothing against them. They're not skilled for that. That's not the skill that they...
No, that's not what they're selling, right?
Yeah.
I have no interest in people actually facing an adaptive challenge, because then they'll no longer need their food.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point to bring up, is all of these things that look different on the surface, whether it's the keto diet, Whole30, learn to chew 30 times, even intuitive eating. I got some beefs with the intuitive eating movement too, but that's a whole other. All of these things are technical. They're approaching it from a technical challenge. They're giving the power to the food instead of saying, wait a second, let's understand. And so I think people need to realize, you may have think that you have tried everything, but it's really the same approach, just it's packaged differently. And that's because most people believe that weight loss isn't a technical solution. Like, if you just knew how bad sugar was for you, we all know that puts more pressure on it, right? Versus adaptive change is building this self-trust. And Juliet, I think you said something very key, is that what you and Sass together is you build it along the way. It's not like all of a sudden you're like, I can do this. You're like, I don't know if I can do it. And when I work with my clients on this, which is adaptive change, I'm like, you're going to mess up. But we're going to, like, quote unquote mess up, but we're going to look at research. That's research. What happened there? What was
messing up is good.
Yeah, exactly. You
have
learn
to mess
faster. Yeah, you learn faster. So I think let's talk.
Yeah. So Heifetz, who wrote Adaptive Leadership, which I think that's one of the most important leadership books I've ever read. And I speak as a I used to be a management consultant before I became a life coach. I can't say coach without kind of cringing a little bit. Anyway.
Why is that?
Because our industry, Sass and I, we have these masterminds.
Your industry is really saturated with shitty people.
Well,
so are trainers, right? So are therapists. But I know what you mean. Your industry you're plotted against actual psychiatrists and therapists. They always, I think, look at coaches versus them, and it's a totally different thing.
Well, and a lot of coaches,
it's the infantilizing of the client, I think, that I just can't be doing with.
Well, and a lot of coaches approach things as technical changes when they're adaptive, and it's just because they don't know. Like,
absolutely.
There's all these coaching programs, right? They're like
really
exactly, but a lot of life coaches are doing these programs that are like, all right, you ask this question, and then this question, and then the client is supposed to have this sort of breakthrough, and
Sass and I were trying.
I mean, most of the coaching models these days are actually built around technical solutions to adaptive problems.
Sass and I
they're very cognitive based. Sorry, Ali.
No, there's no way. I sound so rude.
Yeah, their NLP and cognitive behavioral therapy are the two most common models. They're just packaged differently in different coaching schools, and they don't really take into account the whole person.
Yeah,
or the structural environment that person is living in. So what ends up happening is you get someone having a breakthrough in their own personal thinking, but then they go back into their life, which has not changed. And of course the environment is the same. So, behavioral change doesn't stick. And then it becomes it's my fault. I didn't do it right kind of feeling. Oh, I need to go call my coach again.
Yeah.
I saw someone, a health coach, being like, I'm setting up a day with my VIP client who I've been working with for 5+ years. And I'm like, you should not be working with the client for 5 years. I mean, sometimes I have clients, they go away for a little bit and come back. And I love that. But that's because part of adaptive challenges, there's always new questions. But if you're working with someone for 5 years, that is not a good thing. Like, a good thing. And Sass and I were talking, we're trying to figure out what to call how we coach, because it's not coaching. I don't know I haven't come up with a good.
I think the thing is we're quite rare because we both have master's degrees in coaching, and that's that's not a typical thing. I think it's changing, but it isn't typical. And I think that it's a good thing that kind of graduate programs are now looking at coaching and taking it seriously, because both you and I have seen that this can be incredibly powerful for people who are facing adaptive challenges. But it's until you understand the difference between the two, I think most thinking coaches would be actually that would work better. That would be more helpful to my clients. But I think, to kind of get back to the sort of the model, Heifetz, who came up with this model of adaptive versus technical change, says that the biggest problem, the biggest issue facing people who struggle with change, and he was looking at leaders in organizations, so people who are leading big teams of people through quite traumatic organizational shifts and strategic shifts. But he says the biggest issue is that we treat an adaptive challenge like a technical problem. So we assume that a nice little 4x4 matrix, or a kind of linear path, or a to-do list, or a diet plan, or a 12-step method, or whatever it looks like, is going to be enough to support you as a nuanced and complex individual to go through this place of ambiguity, an unknown path that no one has ever walked before. And so when you start to look at it from that perspective, you start to see, well, of course that would never bloody work. The problem isn't with me, actually. The problem is that I'm giving my power to the solution, the 12-step method, the diet, the food, and it's not actually ever going to be enough.
Yeah, so let's talk about what then are the elements of something that are effective, because some of the tenets of adaptive change is that the answer is with the client. The answer is with you listening. It's not with the coach. It's not with Juliet. It's not with Sass. It's not with me. We are, I think of Truth with Food as a birth canal into agency and power, right? You're like, we were joking with Truth with Food. One of my clients, she worked with me privately, and then she joined Truth with Food because it takes about a whole year to get this new mindset and the tools down. And she's lost 30 pounds as a side effect of going through her own adaptive change process. And all her friends are noticing, and they're like, what are you doing? They're like, can you eat a cookie? Can you not? She's like, no, it's not like that. It's like, she's like, what do you say to that? And I'm like, what do I tell people? And our whole Truth with Food group laughed. And I'm like, can you say, I pierced my soul? You know what I mean? Because you're like, it's so hard to explain if you haven't been through it, but it really is giving you the power and seeing where you give your power away. But everyone gives their power away differently. So it can't be this formula.
Well, and I think you're hitting on a fantastic point, which is that it's really hard to say, I've been through an adaptive challenge. It doesn't have a nice, pithy, tagline. It isn't Whole30.
When people ask me what my diet is, and I say I don't have a diet.
Yeah.
They're so confused by that, especially being in the fitness industry. And, I'm supposed to there's expectations that I have some sort of perfect planned out diet, and I don't at all.
Yeah.
And it's not intuitive eating either. I think I love that you're saying that, Allie, because that's it's such BS. It's like, what does that even mean?
Well, because if you don't work on, the inverse of power and agency and being able to deal with certainty is self-doubt. And Sass, this is like her thing. She's done research on it. I'd love to talk about the self-doubt. But a lot of eating is to numb out self-doubt. And so that's kind of my issue with intuitive eating is they're like, it's hard to tell when you really want food and you're hungry for it versus it being a numbing tool. And that is very nuanced to flush out, because sometimes, I eat quote unquote badly, but I don't think of it as badly. I'm just like, I want this and I'm enjoying myself. Right. But if I have all this self-doubt, I don't know if I really want it. I know I'm going to eat it because I feel a compulsion to eat it because I need to numb out. And if you've never gone through an adaptive process, in my opinion, it's very hard to listen to your intuition, because I think the emotions that, whether it's self-doubt, fear of failure, all the stuff that I work on with my clients, that blocks your intuition. that you can't, it's harder to hear that. So kind of went off, but let's talk about self-doubt, because I think this is
okay. Cool. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Yay, self-doubt.
You're feeling doubtful. That's amazing. Yeah. Well, I think the first sign that people realize that they're experiencing self-doubt is they often come up against their own resistance. Right. So I think my own sort of theory that is forming over the years is that resistance is self-doubt manifested.
Can you give an example when you say resistance?
So say I want to lose weight, for example, and I have this idea that I'm going to prepare all my food, right? So I don't have to really think about it too much. I'm going to get my meals all organized and all of that kind of stuff. So that's my plan. And then I find that actually can't really be asked going to the supermarket to get all the food. Sunday was going to be my prep day. Like, you know what? The Gilmore Girls rerun, I could easily just spend the next 4 hours watching. So I probably won't be doing my prep. So there's all these kind of resisty behaviors that show up. And they often show up as inaction or action that is contrary to something that would support the plan, the sort of desired outcome, whatever that can look like. And I see this in like I coach with a lot of women leaders who will say things like, I want to have more free time, so I'm going to delegate more. And then you find actually, I'm not delegating a damn thing. I'm still doing everything, right? So there's resistance to making that change. And usually the reason that we create this sort of resistance, which can feel sometimes like rebellion, particularly I think in a diet mentality, it's like, I'm not following the rules. Usually it's because we're protecting ourselves from something. So there's usually a sort of, I think it's a very understandable, logical, and sometimes just below the level of consciousness, there's usually a rationale why we resist doing what we actually say we want to do. And I discovered when I was looking at losing weight that one of the reasons I was resisting losing weight was because I didn't want to be like the skinny mean girls at my school that bullied me for years. I wanted to be seen as a woman of substance who had a bit more going on than the kind of high school cool kids, you know. And I still was carrying that old story of what it meant to be thin.
That was an unconscious thing that you were carrying around, or you really consciously?
Like a lot of my resistance, my self-doubt around my ability to do this, my ability to lose weight, or the kind of resistance that I was creating against doing that, against that desired outcome. There was an underlying belief that if I lost weight, if I became someone who was, you know, maybe 140 pounds as opposed to the sort of 180 pounds that I am now, quite happily, if I lost a shit ton of weight, that would create a transformation in me that did not feel like me anymore.
I think that's the key right there, is the not feeling like you anymore for a lot of people, because we're so used to being one way, and most of our life is very habitual and comfortable. Even if you are feeling doubt and, you know, poor self-esteem, there's still a comfortability with that self-hatred. And so it's even to go the other direction is scarier than just to stay where you are.
Well, and it gets very meta, because to even to just dwell in that self-doubt feels exposing, right? It's like, oh my God.
It can be really debilitating for people.
Yeah. I think too, another example, Sass, that I think what you were talking about is, I don't have time to go to the grocery store, or you start having these, and you talk about this a lot in your writing, and Keegan talks about it too. They're often, the day-to-day resistance sounds like a noble deed, right? Like I have to go get the kids. I have to be there for everybody else. I have to get to the office early. I'm taking on all the projects. And those noble deeds are resistance, because and this is the work that I get into, and going back to that good girl, you're then challenging another identity that you feel really good about. Like, I'm the great worker. I'm the good mom. I'm the good sister, you know. And even though all of this is where it gets super meta, even though all of these labels really are adaptive challenges, what do you mean you're a good mom? No, there's no good mom manual. There's no good daughter manual, but we create these solid definitions so to appease the self-doubt.
It's to protect ourselves, to diminish the anxiety, when in fact it doesn't diminish the anxiety.
Right. They protect us in the beginning, but in the end they become the cage, right?
Exactly. And I completely agree. I think resistance often wears a cloak of a noble deed. And I see this particularly, I think, in the relationship that women have with time. I see this a lot. Right? So we have, I think time is a feminist issue. I think that we've given time this kind of glorified reputation where if only I had more time, I'd be unstoppable. I would be able to be the good mum, the great boss, I'd write the book, I'd, do the graduate program, I'd go to the gym, I'd go to the grocery store, I wouldn't be eating a bucket of Doritos every night for my supper if only I had more time. And I think that actually time that relationship to time can be either a sign of resistance, where actually if you did create the time, which most people can create a bit more time, if you sort of start to look at how you're actually spending your time, you can start to see that your relationship with time may be covering up some self-doubt, because that's a nice, easy, and very, very culturally acceptable reason to not run the marathon or write the book, right? If you've got no time and everybody's too busy, I think we're all kind of collectively quite bored with how busy we all are. That actually we use that as a nice cloak of resistance. And the other part of it is that, we still rely on women to provide unpaid domestic labour on a massive scale in 2017 still. So women absolutely do, take the burden of and the brunt of emotional labour in workplaces and families that, we're the ones that know when the loo roll is running out or when someone's birthday's coming up. So all of that kind of brain space is taking up extra time. And I think for women to actually say, no, I need my own space. I may not be the best mum or the mum that you knew 2 months ago, because now actually I have an appointment with myself every morning, not with you, getting you out of bed, teenage son. I think once we start actually claiming some time for ourselves, you start to then get into a place where, oh, wow, I'm really in unknown territory here, because my big excuse for why I couldn't do this thing is no longer valid. And so then you're on the adaptive path, right, where it's all unknown and a bit scary and full of self-doubt. So it's really freaking easy to then go, you know what, actually I'll go back to being busy again. Because at least then I knew where I was.
I am having this exact thing right now in my own personal life with figuring out. My therapist said something really amazing to me just last week, and the light bulb just went off like, and it was just like, she said, do you even exist if you're not doing? And that was just, for where I am right now with my career, was everything I needed to hear. Because do I exist? Am I a worthy person if I'm not doing and producing? Because most of my life I've been producing work, and trying to better other people's lives, better my life. But what does it look like when you're not doing that? Are you still okay as a human being?
Exactly. And I think you're talking to something that, I sort of feel, picks up on, this is how our patriarchal world works, right? We prize certainty, we prize doing, we prize happiness above all things. And so when, the three of us are turning around and saying, actually, when you're uncertain, when you're just being, and when you're in that self-doubt place of, shit, I actually kind of can't pin this on anyone else. I need to look at how I can make this work for me. That is, it is a revolutionary act, I think, to be courageous enough to step onto that unknown path.
Well, and what Juliet, you're talking about all the doing, and Sass, you're talking about the time is, and this is often for women, we are conditioned. You don't even know you're conditioned, because it's just so part of the culture to think that our power often lies in controlling other people's responses. And oh, this looked good. This looked good. And the reverse of that, if you're listening, is, are you always questioning, did that come across right? Did I say too much? Am I too much? Right? We're conditioned to think our power is in controlling other people's responses. And that is an insatiable place to be, because you're the common denominator and someone's always different. And the questioning alone takes you away from your power. And when you start to sit in that self-doubt, that uncertainty, and saying, wait a second, is this working for me? You're starting to take back the power and starting to learn your own preferences. And that's really important in adaptive challenges, is because a hallmark of adaptive challenges is the questions start to change. You go in with one question and then you're like, oh, this is actually really about this X, Y, and Z. And now I have a whole new set of questions. And then you answer those. And then it's like, like, for example, like with social, like you're saying, oh, I just need to go home early. A lot of my clients realize, oh, wow, I have social anxiety because I think I have to be there the whole time. So it's like, it originally went into, how do I not eat the cookies or drink 3 drinks, to, oh my God, do I need to leave here sooner? Do I need to make an intimate connection with someone? Because I don't like shallow talk and this is boring. Do I even like this? And so it's really important for everyone listening to realize your power comes from knowing your preferences, and then having, some people will say permission, but to me, that's agency. That's saying, I can act on those preferences and I have a choice here.
You cannot control other people and how they will react to your free agency, which I think is tricky for people, because it does change relationships that you have had in the past. Because if
some of them get better, a lot of mine have.
Some of them do, but then some of them don't. And you have to be willing and open to that, because you may not have those same people in your life, and you probably don't even want those people in your life if you're starting to have adaptive change and have that sense of free agency.
Well, I think I think this is where the difference between attention and recognition come in, right? Because women, and this is what weight is a lot about, you get attention, you feel like the real you, right? And it's like, but again, attention is insatiable. It's not as meaningful. I was talking to a client who has lost a bunch of weight and people were noticing, and she's like, it's not, but she also did this really great job at work, and she's she's in the healthcare system. She's really good at what she does, and she's learning to be even better. And she just finished this amazing rehabilitation project, and people were recognizing her for that. And she's like, that feels so different than when people are like, oh, you look great. And we do all need that recognition, right? So as you develop those deeper relationships and those right people stay, you do get that recognition. So I think that's
as long as you don't have attachment to the recognition, because what I mean by that is that you have to like keep it up, right? When somebody says, oh, you look great, I think then there's a level of, well, I better not look great. I'm talking just purely superficial, but I think it's deeper meaning when somebody says you did a great job on something that's meaningful to you.
Well, that's what she was saying. But what I was going to say is the difference between attention and recognition. Recognition is who you are, right? Yes, she's in a role and she plays that role. I mean, like, she needs skill set, but it's who she brings, what she brings to the table and her strengths. And it comes from that being place rather than frantically always having to do. So yeah. And she was saying it's so much different being recognized for who I am and the work I've done to be at this level versus, oh, you look great in a pair of jeans. That's nice, but it doesn't stick in the same way.
And one of the things I've seen, and I've seen it again and again with clients that I work with around cultivating self-belief, is that they get to see what it's like when they kind of stop the dance of likability, right? When you just stop dancing, you're just like, I am over keeping everybody else happy and making sure that the number one impression I make on the world is that I'm likable. It becomes much easier then to kind of unhook your esteem from praise and from criticism. Like, they both begin to feel a bit neutral because there is a kind of solid core of self-trust that's like, yeah, cool, I can see why you might feel like that. I can see why you might think that looks better on me or whatever. And it becomes a kind of a sort of, it's almost like just clouds that are passing, rather than the kind of weather is right on you and you can't see for the rain or you can't see for the bright sun. that actually it's just weather, and you're in it. There's something very powerful about that when you kind of unhook from that praise and criticism.
And I think what's so fun about it is when you approach adaptive challenges is you start to, that same feeling that you used to call self-doubt is more like, oh, what can I do here? Right? There's a turning point. It's like, how am I going to, it's not, oh my God, can I do it? It's like, what am I going to create here? You know, and it's still the same feeling. You have a completely different meaning of what that uncertainty means.
Well, and I think, you know, our bodies remember, you know, what things feel like. So you may, you know, for me, it's like this kind of gut clutch of anxiety whenever I feel self-doubt. And it's like, now I'm like, oh, okay, something's happening here. What am I resisting? What am I protecting myself from? You know, what are my kind of unconscious, unspoken, unknown, or not looked at reasons why I'm resisting that? And then it becomes quite a quick process to move through that adaptive challenge. You know, sometimes you can feel like you're going through a whole thing in an afternoon, whereas in the past it might have taken months. So yeah, so you know, and I guess that one of the reasons I think that having a thoughtful, trustworthy guide, an advisor, someone who understands this, is that while no one has the answers for you, you're the expert on you. If you have a coach that understands this kind of work, they know about that. So they can kind of give you the sort of like, look, this is probably what the geography of this adaptive challenges might look like for you. It's totally normal to feel like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing and I'm probably doing it all wrong. We call that research, you know, and it's totally okay to just try some stuff out. That's experiments, you know, because then you start to get a sense of what your preferences actually are. And I think having a guide who can just sort of walk with you along that path and you know, check in with you around how that is working for you. What is working? You know, recognizing that where you've come from, because I think we can forget that so easily. I think it is great to have someone there, you know, and that's why I always have a coach. I always have a supervisor. I've done that for 6 years that I've been coaching. I've always had someone kind of in my corner, just sort of, you know, helping me see where I'm going. And I've used different coaches or mentors or supervisors at different times in on my own sort of journey. Everyone uses the word journey, don't they? But I think that, you know, it can be really hard to do this stuff on your own, and you know, really you don't need to.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, do you have any, like, I mean, adaptive challenges don't offer tips and tricks so easily because it's unique to the individual. But, you know, as you were talking, I think a big takeaway for people listening, maybe go through like a resistance inventory. Like, where are you kind of 1 foot on the gas, I want this, and then 1 foot on the, oh, but I've got to do this, or I've got to, you know, where are you creating resistance in your life? And just start to notice that. Because I think sometimes when we've normalized it, we think like, oh, that's just an excuse, or no, this is really true. Is it?
Yeah, that's completely it. Because I think, and that's really where things like NLP and CBT, the sort of very common coaching methods, and I know the School for Integrative Nutrition use a lot of that kind of approach, that you start to get a bit like in the circular intellectual argument of, am I actually having a thought that I don't want, or is this something I'm creating? When actually, yeah, you know, maybe you do need the carbs, honey. You know, so I think there is something about just being aware, like noticing how you are responding to your circumstances. You know, getting really in tune with your body, with your, you know, how you feel before, during, and then 2 hours after you eat. I think that for me has been one of the simplest and hardest to remember processes to go through. Just to think, oh, actually, I really have a bad response to onions. You know, actually, some root vegetables don't agree with me. Whereas, you know, anyone on a diet, veggies go nuts, you know, carbs I'm good with, you know. So it's kind of like, you know, just building that awareness. And I think, you know, anyone from any, particularly Eastern philosophy, would say that any change begins with awareness. You have to know where you're at. So that's really about being. That's the opposite of taking action. That's just observing.
Yeah. And I think then beyond that is, once you become aware, is to then ask yourself, well, what meaning am I making of this? when you're doing the avoiding, or when the resistance is coming up against something that you want, what meaning are you making about that? Really ask yourself that.
And I think the step before that, part of that observation, is looking internally, right? Because we're so ready to say it's my schedule, it's the kids. But how are you responding to that? And we've talked about this in earlier podcasts, and this is one of the first things we work on Truth with Food, just labeling. Maybe you don't have the words for the feeling yet, but just labeling, what is this sensation? What is this feeling? And then what am I making it mean? But really looking internally instead of, did I make my points? Is this good or bad? Is like Sass was saying, Sass, I feel so bad if you really can't do onions. I love onions.
I have a lot of people in my life who can't do onions.
But so looking internally at the body rather than saying, oh, I got my veggies in. And that internal, I've had so many clients, they're almost embarrassed that they can't locate their own hunger. And I'm like, but no one has taught you that you have the answers. You're always taught to keep in your points, eat this. No one has ever said, how does that feel? So I think that's really important for people. When you start to just observe, make sure you're looking at the internal experience, not the external, because the power is in your internal reaction, not in the environment around you.
Yeah. And I think, people that really just kind of look at this, like the word nourish is so bloody powerful to me. That feels to me like what that's one of my kind of life missions is, am I nourishing myself? And I know I don't eat well if I'm not sleeping well.
Oh.
So, often the word, that concept of nourishment, sort of half a dozen things down the list is food.
Yeah, it's not just really, food.
Exactly. It is intimacy. It's, connection. It's sleep. It's doing meaningful work. Feeling like, did I do good today? Do I feel proud of myself today? That really nourishes me. And then it's like, okay, cool. Now I feel like I'm hydrated and I'm slept well. So it's so much easier then to nourish myself with food.
So some parting words, I think, for those people who feel really stuck, like there's no action, just so total inaction. And they just resistance, right? They feel like they're in the mud. What is something that you can provide to them just to give them that little bit of nudging?
I would say sit down in that mud and get all nice and comfy and really just sit there for a little bit and let yourself feel what's happening. Right? Whatever is in your way is the way, right? That's the path. Whatever your resistance is, that's the first thing we need to look at. And I think just knowing that no one else has the answers for you can be sometimes like the worst news ever and sometimes the best news ever. So maybe just sit with that. If no one else had the answers for you, what would you do?
Ooh.
And just kind of sitting in it, like, what is it about this particular challenge that is most difficult? Like, what is this mud comprised of that you're standing in and feeling stuck in? And I'm such a fan of just writing, because I think we can tell our emotional truth a little bit on the page. And this isn't about being poetic. It's bullet points are fantastic when you're in the mud, right? And it's just, tell your emotional truth. Get super honest with yourself. What is your mud about? If no one is going to come save you out of that mud, what do you want to do about that?
And I think something really powerful that you brought out is that stuckness is resistance. Like you're not unique. You're not the first person to come across this, but that stuckness, you're actually in mud already. You don't have to go in there. You're already there.
I think I really wish at the times in my life where I had felt that, just like, holy shit, I have no idea what I'm doing, feeling that kind of real stuckness, like I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm so fed up with where I am and I have no idea what to do next. I wish that someone had kind of come and whispered in my ear, like, this is where it gets interesting. this really is the place where you start to, just kind of shut out the noise of everybody else, from your girlfriends who are doing some diet to your partner who, loves mashed potato every night, to, whoever is in your life that has the voices that are causing that noise. Just getting some stillness around what is actually true for you right now. It's the first step. The first step is never, right, let's go clean out the cupboards, It's never that. It has to be quiet contemplation, self-reflection, starting to hear that little voice that's inside you that has the answer.
You brought up a good point. Let's go clean out the cupboard. Let's purge everything in the closet that we don't need. I'm going to do the dishes. I'm going to clean. Like, all that is a distraction. And then you're like, wow, I took action. Like, because those are probably things that you had been putting off. So then you have this false sense of, I'm okay. I took an action. I feel proud of myself, but not really.
Well, and
you're still in the mud.
Yeah, exactly.
In the mud. It's just
you just did your dishes in the mud. Good job.
One word that might help people. This helps my clients a lot, because I think I still find myself catching myself when I'm resisting. Like, I don't realize I'm resisting. But since you're already in the mud, think about softening. Like, rather than saying, I shouldn't be doing this, I can't believe I'm still here. I love, Sass, your point of like, what if this is where it got interesting? Like, what if I just sit here? Why does this make brilliant sense that I'm here? And like that, and softening into that almost to me is a way of ending the resistance of being resistant, right? Because it's super meta, but it's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
So just for sometimes, because I don't know about you, but I found with a lot of my clients, like, they're in the mud often, but they don't know they're in the mud. And so just knowing that they're there rather than wrong or needing to be fixed, it's like, oh, this is what resistance is. And
and I think often, just to sort of put perhaps some words around it, I think resistance tends to be feeling resentful, angry, disappointed, sad, fed up. Anything that's in that family of emotions is probably that, that's a sign that there's some stuff happening for you, that it's taking you into a place where you're in unknown territory. Because the temptation then is to numb that out, because they're really difficult emotions to be with. So we try and distract, defer, or sort of, numb those emotions out. That's a typical response. And just having, I love that phrase of just softening into it. Having some compassion for yourself. You're doing the best you can with the tools you have. The tools you have, we're never going to solve the problem that you've got.
I think also patience for people. We are, as you know, the world we live in, patience isn't necessarily something that we tend to have. Everything has to happen instantaneously. These kinds of things, it doesn't work like that. I had a client ask me, well, how long is it going to take before I don't eat everything in the cabinet? How long is it going to take before I love my body? There's no quantitative, until I don't know. I don't know that answer.
Well, a timeline is another tool of certainty, right? A timeline is a tool of certainty. Oh, if this takes 30 days, when you start to really understand that life is one big uncertainty after uncertainty, you start to realize most things, that deadlines, even this idea that you lose the same amount of weight every week, it's like all to mitigate that soothing of that uncertainty. And like, no one can tell you that stuff.
Well, and the reality is we are on a rotating orb that is spinning at 65,000 miles an hour around a sun, right? So it's kind of like, try not to worry too much. Everything's out of control. There's very little we have control over, Thank God for gravity. Otherwise we'd all be all over the place, But that kind of, sometimes I like those sort of like reminders from the physicists that actually, it's all uncertain, every damn thing.
Yeah. And the better you get at it, the wilder and I think more meaningful life. And that's
enjoy the ride.
Yeah. And, just some parting words for people listening. I think it's really important to realize that adaptive change actually gets easier the more you do it. Rather than with dieting feeling harder and harder. I know my clients are like, oh my God, this is like easier and easier. And when people, and we laugh when people are like, how can you just resist those donuts? They're like, oh, you don't know the stuff I had to work through to like not really care about donuts because it was never about the donuts, but it gets easier and you have more agency, you feel more and more powerful and you will surprise yourself, I think. And I think that's the payoff. And that's why it's worth doing adaptive work. I mean, that's kind of, I'd love to hear your closing thoughts though, Sass, because you.
Yeah, no, I'm such a fan of this work, and because I think it works. I've worked with, like you, I've worked with hundreds of people around this stuff, and I've never seen it not help someone. And really all it takes is a willingness to kind of walk an uncertain path. And I recognize that can sometimes feel like the most scariest place to go, but fuck it, man, it's not worth not doing.
You're already walking an uncertain path. Every single person listening to this podcast, you are walking an uncertain path. You have no idea what could happen tomorrow, in the next second. We really don't, all of the false mechanisms of controlling is, it's not, exactly. They're not real.
Exactly. And in this time in our lives, in this year, so much is uncertain, we have so little control over anything. So, it's always a bit of a fallacy, I think. What is amazing is on the other side of it, when you have agency, when you trust yourself, when you have your own opinions that you're really comfortable with, that are thoughtful and considered and are not about pleasing other people or playing to the crowd. When you can tell the difference between popularity and substance. When you can, that's a life that has some juice to it, real juice. It's not clean juice.
That's a great place to end. It's not a juice cleanse. It's juice from within.
More juice, yeah.
So, Sass, where can people find you? You guys, seriously, Sass and I are both kind of about coaching, but she is the real deal. She has these wonderful, once a month, it's notes from the path. I love getting them. They feel so real, but like comforting, but not in a like, oh, this woman doesn't know this woman is on some sort of happy pills. It's really grounded and optimistic, but it's grounded. It's relatable. So how can people find you? Because I want more people to.
You're so kind.
It's true though. And I wouldn't bullshit you because you know how I really
am. I know. Your tolerance for bullshit is like super low. So I appreciate it. So yeah, my website is sasspetherick.com, and I'm sure you'll put a little link in the notes because my husband's surname is really hard to spell. Thank the Cornish people for that. And yeah, I coach with people, like human people, and I mentor coaches as well. So there's a bit of that. And I do run retreats and workshops, and I write, and that's pretty much my little gig. And it's hugely meaningful work to me. I think working with people on adaptive challenges is the most fun.
And where can people find you on social media?
I'm Sass Petherick pretty much everywhere because nobody wanted that name. I'm mostly on Instagram and Facebook. I'm thinking about just ending my relationship with Twitter. It's not nourishing me.
A bunch of journalists and people have ended it. It's like kind of they're boycotting it.
I ended it.
Yeah.
For my company, we ended it.
Oh, so. You guys completely ended it? Wow.
Yeah, it's sort of outdated for what we're doing in our industry.
Times are changing, people.
And people can only look at so many things. So
yeah.
You can't keep up with it all.
Yeah. And so thank you so much for being here, Sass. I hope people really walk away with, okay, it's not me. It's every diet and the industry itself trying to oversimplify shit.
It's never you. You're bloody amazing. Yeah. No, if you're listening to this podcast, you are a thoughtful, smart, awesome person, and it's not you, dude.
Thank you so much for listening to the Insatiable podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can connect with us on social media. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Juliet Unite, and Allie at Allie M. Shapiro. M stands for Marie. Please feel free to also email us any questions. We would love to hear from all our listeners. You can reach us at Allie at allieshapiro.com and Juliet at unitefitness.com. We'll see you next time.